Well, welcome. And once again, we are joined by another one of Ottawa's mayoral candidates, Mike Maguire. This is your third time running for mayor. You've come in second before. What was it, and before we begin anything else, what was it that prompted you to run for mayor a third time? What is it that made you decide, I'm going to try this one more time?
Many of the same sets of concerns focused around affordable housing, transit and remedies to the transit situation we find ourselves in, and then some new concerns. Really, there was the safe streets, or making Ottawa a safer place to live, and a final one would be some concern about the evolution of the climate proposals from the City of Ottawa and their workability.
Okay, well, you mentioned housing. That's obviously the biggest issue for us at Operation Come Home. We work very hard to find housing for the homeless youth in Ottawa, along with many other agencies and organizations, but we are in a crisis right now of affordable housing. There isn't enough. We're losing a lot of it, and we're not building enough. So what can we do about that? What, as mayor, would you do about that?
So I think we want to make a couple of distinctions, or I will anyways. So I've worked on the affordable housing issue for quite a lengthy period of time, both privately and as a candidate. I spent years and years in service clubs working with Operation Go Home, which was Reverend Sterling Irving. I also worked with the Union Mission for Men, as well as Harvest House Ministries, which is, as you probably know, is strictly drug-addicted youth. So we have a couple of challenges here. When we speak of affordable housing, is a bit of a euphemism. The city uses what they mean is expensive housing that's got a rent subsidy associated with it, because these aren't purchases. These aren't people owning homes. So presently, the Ottawa, through various associations, Ottawa has about just under 23,000 quote unquote affordable housing units. Those are units the City of Ottawa owns through their various, or uses through their various auspices. Those are, in many cases, rent geared to income, or they are certainly under market value, under market rate. I don't see that expanding very much. We already have a major issue in Ottawa in that we have a huge housing stock. We can't afford to keep up the maintenance on that, which means that there are substandard homes being offered to people who need assistance. I favor a portable rent subsidy, which is much more flexible than dedicating the money to a specific residence. The portable rent subsidy is flexible. It allows us to react very quickly. And I think that's going to be one of the key issues here, is finding a way to react quickly, to be fluid in the type of response that we provide. I have to make one other very clear distinction, though. I've worked with homelessness for, as I say, for quite a while. The lack of affordable housing isn't what I have detected as the principal reasons for homelessness. It's mental health and it's addictions, which need to be addressed as absolute priorities, in addition to finding residences for people.
Oh, with the housing first model, right, which is the one that we go by, the idea is you have to have a house first before you can address things like mental health and addictions, because without that kind of stability, right, without that kind of stable environment, there's really no way to address addictions. There's no way to address mental health issues, because you're still on the street, and the street contributes more to the mental health problems and drug use problems than anything else possibly could, right? So I'm hoping you can explain this portable rent subsidy. What exactly does that entail?
Sure, but I just want to make sure we're on the same page here. I disagree with your characterization. I understand Housing First has a great, it has a very appealing context to it. That is not the experience that I've seen. In fact, in many cases, the homeless people who have been giving free housing end up back on the street because they have not had a moment, they have not had time to adapt to the responsibility of having their own residence. This is confirmed, by the way. I was down to the market for an extended interview with homeless people. I went up and down George Street talking to anybody I could find. I ended up buying a guy lunch just to get a sense of where he's going. And he could not be in an individual residence. If you're talking about some kind of a group home or some kind of managed care, light touch managed care, I could support that. I think that's something that we could see. This is, as you know, there's a broad spectrum of needs here we're trying to address. So there are individuals who are at the very capable end, who are homeless, who would thrive with both a combination of psychiatry, support in the case of what I'm talking about, a portable rent subsidy, so we can get them a first and last month down payment. We can help them with the paying the rent on a residence to get them somewhere to live. Those folks probably will do okay. Then we've got folks at the other end of the spectrum where that's simply not going to work. They need massive intervention. They are hooked on something usually that's far, far in excess of their ability to get off. And until we start addressing those root causes, the mental illness, the drug addiction, I don't think it's going to be productive to start thinking about that cohort housing first. It's not going to work for them.
Well, I don't think we're on the same page. I think that the stats behind Housing First indicate that it is an extremely successful program, right? I think there's something in the neighborhood of 62% of people who receive a home manage to stay in that home, and the most vulnerable are prioritized, right? The people with the biggest issues. And I can tell you just from Operation Come Home's perspective, right? The youth that we see at Operation Come Home, vast majority of them, almost none, end up on the street because of drug use, right? There's that sort of myth that you start using drugs and then all your money goes to drugs and you can't maintain your house anymore and you end up on the street. Well, that certainly isn't the case with our youth, right? But almost everybody who ends up on the street ends up using drugs and ends up having severe mental health issues because they're on the street, right? And so I think if you look at it in that perspective, right, in a harm reduction type of situation, the only thing that's going to give them a platform from which they can recover from the mental health issues, from the drug use issues, is to have somewhere stable to stay, right? And so certainly from our perspective, we've seen that Housing First works, and we're hoping to continue in that model, especially specifically in a scattered housing kind of model where people can choose where they want to live in the city. That gives them a lot more agency over what their living situation is. And from there, they can access the support that they need.
Well, we're much closer here. So that's exactly where I'm going with the portable rent subsidy, is that you're not pigeonholed into either a specific neighborhood or a specific dwelling, which might have an unpleasant connotation because of location and certain activities that occur there. I very much like the idea of giving the individual the responsibility of finding their own residence and giving them the dignity to have a chance to go and get their own residence. That's the beauty of a portable rent subsidy. I will go back again and say, just to clarify, I see this as a perspective, and for high functioning individuals who have not had major mental health breakdowns, they're not suffering from major addictions, yep, I can see this working. And as I say, I do support that, including any services they need, but I also support a portable rent subsidy to get them to a place where they can derive some stability. This does not for a moment mean that we don't also have a major problem with a cohort of individuals who this won't work, and they need a much more direct level of support.
And in that case, if it's not Housing First, what would that direct level of support look like?
Complex answer. Nobody's been able to solve this yet. I think that there is an opportunity here to get very aggressive with mental health services. You can't force someone to get well. You can't force someone to take part in therapy. There's no brainer there. We can do a better job of cleaning up the streets. So a very aggressive crackdown on the people selling these terrible opioids, which is mostly it's opioids, meth, not so much crack anymore, but opioids and meth, fentanyl, those are the big offenders on the street at the moment, according to the street people I extensively spoke to. And I'm sorry if I've lost the theme of your question.
Oh, no, I'm just wondering what that support looks like, right? And you've mentioned fentanyl. Fentanyl is a huge problem. It's a much bigger problem now than it was a year ago. A huge problem compared to 2 years ago. I mean, it's getting worse and worse and worse. It's currently the worst that we've ever seen it. And it's not just opioids anymore or meth, it's also being found in marijuana. It's being found in all kinds of different drugs. And none of the supply is safe anymore, right? And if you want people to get into things like, addiction programs, rehab, treatment, psychological services, all of those sort of things, it does seem like the best way to do that is through harm reduction, right? Safe injection sites, places where people can go to be as safe as possible given the supply that's out there.
Right. We should differentiate here. A safe injection site doesn't mean your supply is clean.
No.
It just means that there's a slightly less potential to be victimized by your own fellow members of that small community. I think you could, I think we're jumping around here a little bit. I do like the idea. I shouldn't say that. I think a needle exchange is a responsible thing to do. A safe injection sites is a step up. I have a little bit of a problem with that. It's not quite the harm reduction model that I'm familiar with. Safe supply is something the city of Ottawa is dabbling with. There is no statistical evidence that this is either a good thing. In fact, there's no evidence that it doesn't make things worse. We're kind of circling around a bunch of different subjects here. I go back again to some of the larger urban areas in the States where they've been experimenting with, unsuccessfully I should add, some minor successes. They're experimenting with a triple P model, police, probation, psychiatry, which is where you've got repeat offenders who might do better with being compelled to choose between incarceration or therapy. They're picking therapy, and it is having some success. I do worry that there might not be any easy answer to this. It's a thorny question that much smarter people than myself are trying to wrestle with, and I'm not aware of a let's be fair here. I'm not aware of a model that has produced a substantially measurable benefit. So we're kind of all feeling around in the dark here, trying to do the best.
No, for sure. And there obviously isn't a great model out there yet that has solved the issue. But at the same time, right, something like a triple P model where the option is, psychiatry, psychology, versus incarceration, right? I mean, two difficult choices, but also there simply aren't enough mental health professionals to fill that void, right? I mean, we have a serious a dearth of mental health professionals to assist with anything of that nature, right? So, as a long-term thing, it might be great, but we also have to really build up our supply of those professionals who can help in that regard, right?
No question. Starting with the pay is abysmal, which is bizarre because I'll give you one quick example. I was speaking to a doctor on Sunday, and we were discussing needle exchange. And this particular fellow was a physician from Manitoba, and he said, this is a no-brainer. You stop one HIV infection, you've saved the healthcare system $5 million. So just for an example, there are some really smart things that we can do. It won't solve it. In fact, it may produce a very small result, but even sometimes a very small result can have a great impact. We go back again just a moment. So I'm dealing closely with a group of Indigenous counselors. These are professionally trained and certified counselors. They're working in and for the city. They'll deal only with at-risk Indigenous populations. I have to say, we're probably fairly close. I am close with that group of counselors in terms of our philosophy going forward. So I don't want to give you the wrong impression. I think I like the idea of stable housing, as I've mentioned earlier. I think we do have a way of providing a better mode of providing stable housing, which is the subsidized rent, the portable rent subsidy, rather than what has been dedicated now is billions. Actually, the city has over $3 billion in property, which is in various states of disrepair. I keep thinking we can do a better job. And if we were to free up, if there ever had been a choice, wouldn't it have been smarter to free up some of that millions and billions of dollars invested in the healthcare services, pay the people doing the frontline care, pay them properly so that you retain them and you retain their good energy and maybe expand it so that more people join. so that we can address that more on a first-hand basis, address the at-risk population.
Well, that may be, but that still doesn't really solve the issue that there's not enough housing that people can afford, right? I'll give you an example. We used to do a thing called, we still do actually, an event every February, $24 challenge. And so we live for a week on $24. And the way we came up with that number is that we took one of the youth at Operation Come Home who was housed as full a subsidy from the city as possible for housing, right? Ontario Works as much as she could be getting from an Ontario Works. She had a part-time job and paid rent in this apartment as best she could, $15 an hour for her part-time job. And at the end of every week, she had $24 left over for food. Now that was in 2018 that we started this. And then in 2019, when we did it, we said, okay, we'll take another youth and we'll figure out exactly what their financial situation is. And we'll go from there. Well, at that point, it was about $2. And so there was no way for us to do it. So we kept the $24 number. If we were to do it today with the price of food, the way it's gone up, the price of everything having gone up, inflation and so on, but Ontario Works not having gone up, the subsidy from the city not having gone up, then we'd be working with negative numbers, right? So that person.
No, you've chosen a very small subsection. Pardon me. You've chosen a subsection of people who are accessing affordable housing. So Ontario Works is just a little less than $800 a month. No, you can't live on that. However, anybody can apply for rent geared to income housing in Ottawa. Granted, as I'm going to agree with you, there aren't enough RGI units available. However, it is incorrect to say everybody's living on 24 or some number like that. A rent geared income, if somebody's on OW, is going to be about $113 a month. So you can live on $600 a month.
Sorry, where can you live on $600 a month?
On a $113 apartment, you can.
Okay, so the apartment costs $113, and you're presuming that you get 800 from Ontario Works, and then you have 600 on top of that for everything else. Okay, well, in certain circumstances, I'm sure that's the case.
Well, hang on though, we should be careful here. Ottawa owns 22,300 units. That is not an inconsiderable number.
Right, and those are the rent geared to income units, right? The 23,000, and as you said, they're falling into disrepair. Some of them are, verging on unlivable. So, would it make sense to put a lot of money into those units and maintain them to a better standard? Update them, get them to be livable units, right? It costs so much for somebody to be on the street, to be homeless. It costs a lot less to update those units to subsidize the rent for those people. Over the course.
Let's take your example. I liked your example a moment ago. We'll take that young lady who was not able to make ends meet. A portable rent subsidy means you're not sentenced to living in one of those substandard units. You can go, right now, a one-bedroom apartment in Ottawa is about $1,600. I just checked yesterday, it's $1,600. It's a lot of money, right? It's a great deal of money.
Yeah.
I liked your analogy that homelessness is very, very expensive, way the hell more expensive than subsidizing the rent for somebody who can get off the street, keep them off the street, keep them in that $15 an hour job. I think that we've got the solution right in front of us. A portable rent subsidy means you're not relying on some of that existing housing stock that the city owns, which, to be blunt, isn't that super, and you're stuck. You're condensed areas that you maybe not want to live. I like the idea of somebody being able to go to Minto and say, I can afford to live here. I'm not going to be missing my rent payments. I've got a job. This is somebody you want to be living in your building. So we do have a method to go forward here that isn't out of our reach. It's just that we're not placing the money in the right spot.
So a portable rent subsidy then would cover more than the 23,000 units that currently exist in Ottawa, right? I mean, is that the notion, that it would be provided to anybody who really can't make ends meet anymore, who can't afford to live in a $1,600 a month apartment?
Yeah, if you meet the basic criteria, and I don't have them in my head, but if you meet a set of reasonable criteria, the City of Ottawa must be able to offer a portable rent subsidy because it's cheaper than what we're doing now. And by the way, this isn't a new idea. Ottawa already does portable rent subsidies.
Right. How many do you know? I mean, and how much would you want to expand that program?
I think, so two answers there. How many? Not a ton. Right now it's offered to people who have come and applied for refugee status in Ottawa and they're presently living on OW in Ottawa. They can apply and receive a portable rent subsidy if they don't like where they're living at the moment. How many can you do? Well, I think you can do a whole pile of them if you stop investing billions in housing stock that's falling down.
And so what would happen with that housing stock then that exists today?
You got to, well, same thing that's going to happen anyways. We own it. It's the cities. So at some point, the city's going to have to bite the bullet. Either you sell it or you fix it. It can't go on the way it is. It's not, I mean, it's simply not sustainable. There was the last study I read was Conestoga Consultants. I think it was 2008. And they ranked, I can't quite remember, I think it was 70% of all of Ottawa's owned properties were substandard. Some were even lower than that, but 7 out of 10 then were substandard, and it isn't much better now.
I would imagine it's probably worse now, given the fact that there hasn't been a whole lot of money poured into them, right? But I mean, a lot of this stuff, when you're talking about it in terms of a campaign, it does require a lot of upfront money, right? It requires the city to say, we're going to invest this much money in improving the housing that we own right now, in providing rent subsidies for people who want to live where they want to live, and that sort of thing. How do you make the case that, you know, for people who may not be familiar with these issues, that an upfront investment of that nature that seems like an awful lot of money is in fact saving us a ton of money in the long run, and in fact even in the short term?
So a couple answers. We know we have a reasonable idea the number of homelessness in the winter here, you know, because we know exactly how many people we house, because it's, if you're not in a shelter, then you die. It's unfortunately, it's very cold. We're dealing with just around 1,000 people on a given, on an average, fluctuates obviously, on an average very cold night, there's about 1,000 people in shelters, which are strictly related to the city of Ottawa. It is the budget for municipal budget for homelessness, all costs in. It's very hard to calculate this because there's so many overlapping, but it's over $30 million. There is more than enough money to take care of the individuals who could be placed into individual residences with a portable rent subsidy. This is not an issue. If we stopped paying for the services to bring them into temporary shelters and all of the ancillary services that brings in, and let them get an independent on their own, there's more than enough money to do that right now. But I have to say again, and I mean, I might come across as a fiscal conservative, but I'm a social democrat. There is a point here where we simply pay whatever it takes because the cost of letting these people die on the street is too high for anyone.
Absolutely. And I mean, I do think at the same time that no matter how much money we put into it, it ends up coming back to us in the sense that we do save money. And I don't think there's any number that we can put into it that doesn't save us money in the long run, right? So, okay, last question, that right? You mentioned that it's going to get cold. Elections coming up in October. You win, you become the mayor, and the first thing is that now it's November and the cold weather's approaching, and we have this crisis right now where more people are homeless than ever before. What is a very short-term solution that we can create? Shelters are full. There's nowhere for people to go. There are tent encampments set up around Ottawa because no one has any other place to go. What can we do in the immediate future, right? In the short term to alleviate that over the winter?
Yeah. Great question. Exact question. You got to be flexible here. This is not the time for pride. We got to be very flexible, and that means assessing the capacities of the people that we're servicing right now. They got to have their capacities assessed. For those individuals who have the ability to take on certain amounts of independence, we have to be flexible and say, if we can't find a residence in Ottawa, well, then we're going to look outside Ottawa. And if that means Prescott Russell or Leeds Grenville or Almont, whatever it takes, we're going to get somebody into a residence that they can call their own, because we don't want them in shelters. We sure as heck don't want them on the streets. And we don't want them being victimized by being forced to do either of those two things. That is, as you say, it is a very temporary measure, but the alternative is impossible. So this is a time for flexible, fluid thinking.
No doubt. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today, and I appreciate it. Best of luck with the rest of the campaign.
Thanks, Eric.